G'day, I'm DK.
And I'm Ardeet.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Two Ticks Town Talk, a segment from the Australia Talks podcast.
Yeah, this is one of our favourite parts of bringing the podcast to you, our listeners.
So please enjoy this segment from the regular podcast.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've travelled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
All right, this week on our Two Ticks Town Talk, we're going essentially down the road from me to Sorrento in Victoria. So it's a seaside town on the Mornington Peninsula in Australia, about 95k southwest of Melbourne. It's just right down on the narrow western tip of the peninsula. Got two peninsulas each side that make up Port Phillip Bay. So it's between Port Phillip Bay and Bass Strait. A popular holiday and resort destination. On the bay side, it's got calm beaches, and then on the ocean side, it's got surf beaches, so you can literally walk from one side to the other and get the different elements of the water. Historic limestone buildings, restaurants, cafes. You get the ferry over to Queensland, to Queen's Cliff. Yeah, just across the Queensland from Sorrento. The ferry over to Queen's Cliff, which is on the other peninsula, Bellarine Peninsula, and scenic walks. And Sorrento's got a population of a bit over 2,000. So the town's European origins go back to late 1860s and 70s. There was an entrepreneur, mention that again, entrepreneur and politician George Coppin, who developed it as a holiday destination, and he called it after the Italian resort town of Sorrento, and he invested in infrastructure, including the Continental Hotel, a pier, sea baths, transport links like paddle steamers, and that made it a very fashionable Victorian-era seaside resort. The area that we know as Sorrento is traditionally Boonwurrung country, and the Boonwurrung mob occupied the Mornington Peninsula for tens of thousands of years. And that specific area is known to them as Bullinatulong. In February 1802, when Lieutenant John Murray's crew landed near what's now called Sorrento Beach, they encountered about 18 local Boonwurrung people. Initial interactions involved sharing bread, but unfortunately turned violent. There was musket and ship fire used after there was an ambush on them. And again, DK, it'd be great if this wasn't such a common occurrence in these early interactions, but as we like to say, that's the reality of it. A couple of interesting factoids about Sorrento, including it includes many heritage limestone buildings, as I mentioned. That Continental Hotel, that's an impressive building. They've worked on it and improved it over the years, but they've still kept the character of it. So yeah, I think it's a very attractive building. Athenaeum Theatre, Mechanics Institute, that's where the European Historical Museum is now. There's a heritage walk. There's a thing called down there called the Sorrento Portsea's Artists Trail, and they have plaques that have got copies of works, whatever that process is that you put photos onto, colour photos onto plates. So works by artists like Arthur Streeton and Arthur Boyd, so that you can see where they painted it, and you can see the image that they were looking at, which I think is really interesting, just from an artistic point of view, just to see it through their eyes and think, oh, this is basically where they would have stood and painted this painting. So, yeah, that's worthwhile doing. There's also the Millionaire's Walk along the cliff, where you get a whole lot of great views across Port Phillip Bay. So, yeah, some good walking down there, some good eating. For me, there's the shopping centre has become a little bit commercialised with some too many well-known brands. But last time I went down there about a year ago, that was starting to change a bit, which was good. But we've got the Sullivan Bay settlement, which is sort of the focus of the Two Ticks Town Talk today, in what is now part of Sorrento. It's about 1k east of the town, which was the first attempted permanent European settlement in Victoria. And that's what caught my eye. Or to be more accurate, it was a comment by a Redditor in the Mornington Peninsula subreddit called Ozdiva who drew my attention to the settlement. So shout out to you, Ozdiva. It was something that I didn't even know about. So very shortly, you'll know all about it. In 1802, Lieutenant John Murray entered Port Phillip Bay and he claimed the area for Britain. Matthew Flinders had explored the region that year. There's a whole lot of positive reports about it, and there's also British fears of French colonisation of Australia. So they were just keen as beans to make sure that something was happening and that land could be claimed for Britain. So in April 1803, HMS Calcutta, which is a 56-gun frigate, and the transport ship Ocean took off from England, carrying Lieutenant Governor David Collins, about 300 male convicts, 16 convicts' wives, some kids, 50 Royal Marines, 18 free settlers and civil officers, so about 400 to 450 people. And they got into Port Phillip in early October 1803. So they anchored there 7th to 10th of October. Collins selected Sullivan Bay, which he named after the British Under Secretary John Sullivan, just near the entrance to the bay. So you can look it up on a map, but essentially you come in through the two peninsulas. There's a huge bay that just looks like another bit of ocean, really, as you're coming through. And just around to the east is where they decided to stop and have a look. They also thought it was a good strategic position, just in case the French came through. They started unloading around the 14th of October, and the settlers and convicts came ashore on the 16th and 17th. On the 16th of October, that was the printing of the first news sheet. In fact, it's the first Victorian printing press, which was set up under the shelter of a spreading tree. They printed out 48 general orders together with garrison orders and published news sheets up until 27th of January. So each order had the royal coat of arms and was placed on the order board. There was just one copy for the whole settlement, but still, that was pretty good. So sort of like overnight, there was just this village born. Chopping down trees, making roads. A parade ground was set up. There was orderly rows of white tents in what had basically been the bush. Only a few weeks before. Did the whole thing. People washing and cooking. Young people going out bird nesting, who had to be severely reprimanded. That's where they just go out and basically steal eggs from birds' nests, which was a thing. At that stage, back in the 1800s, it got to the point where people said, no, this is not a great thing, but people were still tempted because there was this desire to collect these eggs. Of course, there was pilfering, there was fear of fire, and the wells had to be guarded during the day and locked at night to prevent people from actually polluting it, which... bloody funny little monkeys as humans, aren't we?
We are. There's always dickheads. Isn't there?
Yeah, I know. You're sick. Oh, really? You're going to have to drink out of that. The soldiers were sometimes a little bit half pissed, and restrictions had to be placed on their spirit ration. Yeah, no, who would have thought? So they wanted to establish a penal colony to secure the region against French claims and expand control over the Bass Strait trade routes. So the reports described the surrounding country as beautifully picturesque, gentle elevations, bright verdure and profuse flowers. And they were filled with hope for a viable, self-sustaining outpost with access to the resources. They did have a first church parade on 23rd of October. Everyone turned out to thank God for their safe journey, but the convicts, their clothes were worn to tatters. They were almost due for their half-yearly distribution of new ones. So they ended up for the next Sunday, they were given better clothes and told basically, look, make yourself as presentable as possible. So they got a jacket, a waistcoat, a pair of duck trousers, breeches, 2 check shorts, a pair of shoes and a hat. But the Lieutenant Governor said, well, with the exception of the shoes, that has to last you another 6 months and you had to take care of them. So there's also the first imported livestock. A lot of firsts, as you would have thought, in Victoria. In fact, there's a whole list of firsts. And I thought, well, obvious it's going to be first because it's the first one in Victoria. But so I didn't, not listing every single thing, but just the ones of note. So the first livestock imported in Victoria were brought to Sullivan Bay. 2 bulls, 1 cow, 2 heifers, 12 sheep, plus some pigs, goats and poultry. And there was, they were very valuable, and they were actually called in for a census in 27th of October. And so there was an order went up on the board, no part of the livestock belonging to individuals, sheep, swine, goats or poultry, be slaughtered or exported from the settlement until further orders without the government's knowledge and approbation. A return of livestock in possession of individuals of every description to be delivered to the commissary immediately. So it did make sense. I mean, you're trying to make sure that this colony survives. In fact, there was someone or some people kicked a goat and killed it, and they offered a reward of £5, which was back then, £805 was a massive amount of money. So it indicated just how valuable the livestock was. You weren't going to just go out in the bush and grab another goat. They literally didn't exist.
That's such a funny way to put it, right? Is like, no, there's only one. We don't have any more.
That's right. Here's the 2 bulls. What it means? The 2 bulls. That's it.
That's it. That's all we got. Yeah, which kind of, I guess it puts it in perspective, like how early life would have been. Yes, we think of Australia as a land of abundance. In certain ways, it certainly is. But particularly when you're starting a colony and setting things up, you do have to be pretty clever with your resources and all of that.
Yep, and you've also got the time things. It's nice if you sort of got 2 cows. It's nice if you've got a cow and a bull, and they're pumping out calves every couple of weeks. You've got the normal gestation period, and people. I mean, you'd be getting that point. People would be looking at some of them and thinking, "Oh, that would be delicious." But but you have to do the right thing, otherwise you're going to end up starving. So, there was routine community activities, a lot of hardships. Rations were issued, like, beef or pork, biscuit, flour, sugar, and spirits for the military, of course.
Of course.
They set up cooking facilities, did their attempts at husbandry, small-scale gardening. Of course, there was the punishments, the flogging for the convicts, and sometimes the soldiers. But water was a critical issue. That was one of the things that became a real problem there. They improvised things called barrel filters, where they sunk barrels into the sand and water would seep through, so to filter out a lot of the salt, but it was still very brackish and made a lot of people sick. So there was also 2 worries about potential uprising, given the size of the Marine Guard relative to the convict population. Also, a number of the tools that were sent to them weren't of great qualities. So they did some exploration, including walks to Point Nepean, which is down west of that. But the convicts had restrictions, like there was no crayfishing allowed on the ocean beaches at night from late December. I don't know why, but apparently that was one of the restrictions. Convicts escaped. There's 21 convicts escaped, including a bloke called William Buckley. Now, I was just going to give him a mention, but digging into his details further, I think there might be a Sorrento Part 2 on the horizon. Possibly. I'll have to go a little bit more into that, but I just sort of thought, looked him up, thought, hang on. It's got a bit of an interesting story to spring off from the Sullivan Cove settlement. So from the outset, Lieutenant Governor David Collins wasn't really happy with the prospect of making a permanent settlement there. So even though they'd sent off exploration parties, they'd found poor soil for agriculture, didn't think there was much suitable timber, lack of reliable fresh water. Now, this is all way down on the peninsula, so they hadn't gone further north to where the Yarra River was, where Melbourne currently is. They also looked at it and they said, the treacherous entrance to Port Phillip Bay might hinder shipping and whaling potential. And they were also getting a bit antsy, thinking they didn't have many Marines and they were wondering about attack. So those, combined with the water problem and what was becoming a general pessimism, led Collins to request abandonment shortly after the arrival. So even though he had basically been given the authority to do it, he wanted to contact Governor King up in Port Jackson colony in New South Wales in order to obtain his support. So even back then, the bureaucrats sent responsibility up the line when they could. But he did have a little bit of a dilemma on how to accomplish it and get the message, because the captain of the Ocean, the ship that was going to be set up there, was uncooperative. He wasn't interested in doing it. So finally, one of his, Mr. Collins' cousins, volunteered to captain a 6-oared cutter with 6 convicts and basically row up to Port Jackson, row up to Sydney. Now, Collins had a whole lot of dispatches and that from England and things had been entrusted to him, but he sort of thought, I might not send that on this voyage. I'm not feeling super happy about that. So 6th of November, those 7 blokes took off in charge of what was the first Victorian mail, the message being sent up to Governor King. Everybody was sort of watching to see how they'd go to clear the rip at the entrance to Port Phillip Bay. Because it's really small, the tide's coming in and out of Crest. Yes, it's pretty treacherous water. So they got out there and they were about 60 miles short of Port Jackson when they were actually overtaken by the Ocean, the ship. The captain down there had changed his mind, so yeah, okay, I'll take the mail up. So he took them on board and they delivered everything safely to Port Jackson. So that would be a little bit frustrating that they didn't get to finish it.
Yeah.
But also they're thinking, really? You changed it, you knew everything and you decided to, you stubborn old bugger? So... But anyway, I suppose it made a story for them. So I eventually got permission that said, yeah, look, you have to, you can abandon if you want. And they'd only been there 7 months. So Collins and some convicts took off on January 1804 for Van Diemen's Land down in Tassie, which became Tassie, and joined an existing settlement at the Risdon Cove on the Derwent River, and then a second group followed in May. And the move relocated the colony to what became Hobart. So about 30 people died during that brief occupation there. So it was one of the preceded the more successful permanent European settlements of Victoria, particularly decades later, what became Melbourne. And as I said, there's a whole lot of firsts, the First Magistrates Court, hospital, postal service, wedding, christening, all those sorts of things. So looking at modern-day Sorrento with the luxury of cars, roads, modern civilization and hindsight, I find it a bit hard to imagine this settlement being so short-lived. However, it's also impressive how quickly they set up a village and then how decisively they cut their losses and moved on. I thought that was good management. So look, there's not much physical evidence remaining down in settlement from today, from the settlement at Sullivan Bay. There's a few graves, barrel parts and leg irons, and the Collins Settlement historic site is now protected. So next time you're down in this week's Two Ticks Town Talk town of Sorrento, take a moment to ponder how you would have fared in this once difficult part of a strange new land.
I like that. That's a really good way to frame it, because you're right. It would have been. This country is a very harsh place, as we are infamous for, I guess I should say. And I feel like at that point in time, you very much would have to realize when there's no point in continuing. The odds are stacked against you, because it's the only way you're going to survive, really. If you keep trying to, tough it out, there's a point where you're probably all just going to die, which did happen a lot. So it's like you said, good management to go, hey, I think enough's enough. We're going to have to move on. I do think it's interesting that instead of going like sort of back to Melbourne or staying sort of within Victoria, they decided to go down to Tassie, which is.
So Melbourne hadn't even been the site for Melbourne hadn't been discovered. So that's that was part of what sort of. So this was 1802. Melbourne. I should have had that written down. Melbourne. They didn't come in through Port Phillip and find the mouth of the Yarra River and think, oh, this is a good spot, until something like 1834, 1840 or something. So that's the and thanks for mentioning that, because that obviously wasn't clear. So this mob came in and they were the first ones into this Port Phillip Bay. And they said, well, this is where we'll go, not knowing what was up further to the north. And they left. And it was, a few decades until they went back there and saw, this is not bad.
I'm curious as to why they didn't do much more exploration, because Port Phillip is pretty big. Like Sorrento to Melbourne, huge. It's what's that distance? Almost 60 k's. So that's or 35 miles. That's not an insignificant amount of distance. But obviously they had boats, ships, because they went to Tasmania. So I do wonder what stops them from sort of exploring the bay a bit more, or maybe it was a case of sort of, as you alluded to, the military strategic advantage of controlling the mouth to Port Phillip Bay was kind of their main objective, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I did think that too, and I didn't find anything to say, well, this is why that. I think probably too, they, given at that time, it was like really early days in the colony. It was sort of, I'm guessing their orders weren't, you're here to explore. Your orders are to, we know there's a bay there, get there, secure it, start a new colony, or, start a colony, if you can, a penal colony. And him getting there and thinking, well, this is my orders. I'm not going to sort of take off all over the place because I've been told this is where I need to go. So I don't know, maybe it was a lack of imagination on Collins's part. Maybe it was simply the orders were so strict. Or maybe it's just a case of they just had so much on their plate trying to survive for that 7 months it was, we just don't have the resources to go.
And get me out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Like I could imagine you thinking, well, if we send the ship off and the ship gets lost, we can't go elsewhere. So,
that's true. Yeah, that is true. Or if they hit a rock or a reef or whatever, they wouldn't have known what sort of obstacles lay ahead. And you're right, actually, that's a good point. They probably didn't have the resources to start a second settlement, which was probably a big determining factor of, we probably can't start another one, so we're just going to have to pack it up and join an existing colony. But I'd imagine this sort of thing has probably happened more than we realize around not just the country, but of course around the world. But yeah, some of these hidden little failed colonies might be an interesting little rabbit hole to go down to find out more about. A wormhole. Well, it might not be
time.
Yeah, I think that could be quite interesting, actually. But again, how much information we have, I don't know. But yeah, no, I think it's a great way to think about it. That's really interesting. You might have to go down and stay in Sorrento. Oh, poor you. You'll have to go and stay there over a weekend or something like that and have a look around and see what you can find.
Now that I know about this, because there is a little monument that said something, because someone had posted something on Reddit saying, I found this monument about Sullivan's Bay. I thought, okay, didn't really, because it wasn't a great photo. I thought I'll put it on this the Mornington Peninsula subreddit, and then it wasn't until this person came back and said, I found an article about that. I thought, well, didn't even know that, because there's not a big deal made about it. But when I'm down there next, I plan to do a little bit more digging around there and understand that a bit more, because now I've got some context.
I think that this is a perfect illustration of that saying that more history has been lost than has been written down. And I think this is like a good example of that, where it's not quite lost, but it's kind of been forgotten to the point where very few people pretty much know about it or talk about it. It's just a handful of people have recorded it. Otherwise, it would effectively be pretty much lost. So, no, so interesting. So interesting.